Hi everyone, welcome to China Insider. On July 23rd, at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum in California, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo implored democracies to work together to defend against expansive threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, calling it a choice between freedom and tyranny in his speech on Communist China. Pompeo said that in more than 4 decades since the United States normalized relations with the CCP, China has not liberalized as many had hoped. People and countries have to tell the truth about the CCP. President Nixon once said he feared he had created a Frankenstein by opening the world to the CCP. And here we are. We can't treat this incarnation of China as a normal country, just like any other. Pompeo called on world leaders not to make the same mistakes the United States had and not to be led by the CCP. Now the United States and the free world are leading the world's development.
We, the freedom-loving nations of the world, must induce China to change in more creative and assertive ways because Beijing's actions threaten our people and our prosperity.
He described the free world must triumph over this new tyranny as the mission of our time.
Free nations must set the tone. We must operate on the same principles. We have to draw common lines in the sand that cannot be washed away by the CCP's bargains or their blandishments. I call on every leader of every nation to start by doing what America has done, to simply insist on reciprocity, to insist on transparency and accountability from the Chinese Communist Party.
Only in this way can it be ensured that the CCP will not erode the safety and freedom of its own citizens and at the same time prevent the CCP from threatening every corner of the world.
If the free world doesn't change, Communist China will surely change us.
Pompeo's remarks capped a series of speeches by top administration officials in recent weeks, seeking to spotlight the CCP's malign actions in the United States and around the world. The CCP's malicious actions include technology theft, human rights violations, and military aggression.
We must also engage and empower the Chinese people, a dynamic, freedom-loving people who are completely distinct from the Chinese Communist Party. The biggest lie that they tell is to think that they speak for 1.4 billion people who are surveilled, oppressed, and scared to speak out. Quite the contrary, the CCP fears the Chinese people's honest opinions more than any foe. And save for losing their own grip on power, they have no reason to.
He called on the Chinese people to examine the actions of the CCP and change these actions. If the U.S. and all other free countries in the world work together, the Chinese people will have a better chance at obtaining freedom.
Securing our freedoms from the Chinese Communist Party is the mission of our time, and America is perfectly positioned to lead it because our founding principles give us that opportunity. Our nation was founded on the premise that all human beings possess certain rights that are unalienable, and it's our government's job to secure those rights. It is a simple and powerful truth.
The United States forced the CCP to close the Chinese consulate in Houston on July 24th. The inside story has now gradually surfaced. President Trump said on July 22nd that other consulates of the Chinese Communist Party in the U.S. may also be ordered to close. The Chinese consulate in Houston is the only consulate of the CCP in the southern United States and is also the first consulate established by the CCP in the United States. David Stilwell, the top East Asia official at the State Department, described China's Houston consulate as the epicenter of efforts by the Chinese military to send students to the U.S. to obtain information such as economic and military intelligence that could advance its warfare capabilities. He disclosed to the media the inside story of the epicenter because the Houston consulate has been engaging in subversive behavior for a long time. Stilwell also mentioned the suspicious actions of Consul General Tsai Wei and 2 Chinese diplomats at Houston Airport. At the end of May 2020, after the U.S. expressed its desire to expel about 3,000 Chinese students and researchers who have ties to China's military schools, the CCP arranged a chartered flight to escort this group of Chinese citizens back to China. The diplomats escorted some Chinese passengers to the boarding gate. However, on the boarding gate certificate held by China Airlines, the dates of birth of the diplomats were wrong. How could the date of birth be false? Obviously, someone entered the United States with a fake passport or identity. These people are likely to do something that violates the interests of the United States. Think about the scene where documents were being burned when the consulate in Houston was ordered to close. You can imagine what kind of things were being covered up. On July 22nd, at the news briefing at the White House, President Trump said,
As far as closing additional embassies. It's always possible. You see what's going on. We thought there was a fire in the one that we did close. And everybody said, there's a fire. And I guess they were burning documents or burning papers, and I wonder what that's all about.
There are 6 other Chinese diplomatic missions in the United States: the embassy in Washington, an office at the United Nations, and consulates in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago. On July 22nd, Axios, an American news website, took the lead in reporting that according to an FBI assessment in court filings dated July 20th, a Chinese researcher, Tang Juan, who is wanted by the FBI, entered the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. Tang Juan came to the U.S. on a J-1 visa and was a researcher at the University of California, Davis. On her visa application, Tang stated that she did not have any affiliation with the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese military. But an investigation revealed that she worked at the Air Force Military Medical University, a PLA-affiliated university in China, and she is considered to be active military personnel. On June 20th, after obtaining a warrant, the FBI searched her home and found evidence of her affiliation with the PLA, a picture of her wearing the CCP military uniform. After obtaining evidence of her relationship with the Chinese military, the FBI questioned her that day. On June 26th, Tang was charged with visa fraud. According to court filings, federal prosecutors wrote that at some point following the search and interview of Tang on June 20, 2020, Tang went to the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, where the FBI assesses she has remained. Jail records show that U.S. Marshals arrested Tang on Thursday, and she was detained overnight at the Sacramento County main jail. Leon Yo, a well-known scholar on China issues, said that the closure of the consulate is part of an increasingly hostile policy displayed by the U.S. government, which scholars call the New Cold War. Another Chinese scholar on China issues, Zhang Jiadun, said, "This is a very good thing the United States has done." He told Voice of America that closing the consulate is a dramatic and necessary step. Zhang Jiadun believes that the United States will take further actions. He said, "This may not be the only step we have to take. There are 4 other consulates with a very large embassy staff. There is a Chinese CCP ambassador whose behavior does not match his diplomatic status. He is trying to illegally recruit scientists. Therefore, there are many other things that the United States should consider doing." Winston Lord, the former U.S. ambassador to China, believes that Xi Jinping is most responsible for the deterioration of U.S.-China relations. He believes that Xi Jinping is the one to be condemned. "I once again attribute most of the blame for the deterioration of U.S.-China relations to China and to Xi Jinping's domestic repression, interference in other countries, including the United States, and his policies towards Hong Kong and Xinjiang. China has shown aggressiveness at home and abroad, and it absolutely and certainly needs a kind of counterattack and firmness," he said. Ambassador Lord believes that the escalation of the diplomatic crisis between the two sides may lead to a hot war, but it will not at the moment. He said, "I think the worst will not happen, but if the tension continues to rise, it will lead to an open conflict, even military conflicts, such as conflicts caused by miscalculations or accidents in the South China Sea or in the Taiwan Strait." On July 21st, Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said that the United States is strengthening cooperation with allies in the Asian region, including Australia, Japan, India, and Taiwan, and it is preparing and deploying its military power in Asia. Japan is providing missiles and other weapons and equipment to Southeast Asian countries. The U.S. military will continue to send ships and sell military equipment to Taiwan to prepare for possible conflicts with the CCP. Esper said during a virtual speech to the International Institute for Strategic Studies that the Trump administration has made strategic preparations for maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific region, including the deployment of new weapons, development of the Navy, the Air Force, and deployment of the Army's long-range weapons. On the same day, Defense News reported that Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Michael Gilday ordered his staff to develop a comprehensive strategy to field unmanned systems in the air, on the water, and under the sea over the coming years. Gilday pointed out that unmanned weapon systems include underwater vehicles and ships, and even the Air Force part has multiple development plans. These combat concepts will be released this fall. Taiwan may be the trigger for a military conflict between the United States and China. Recently, the CCP has stepped up its pressure on Taiwan and has continuously sent fighter jets to circle closely around Taiwan's airspace. This is also a concern of the United States. The U.S. has recently taken a number of actions to contain the CCP. It has passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act and the Hong Kong Autonomy Act to sanction those CCP officials who undermine Hong Kong's autonomy and freedom. The U.S. has also dispatched aircraft carriers to cruise the South China Sea. But Nikki Haley, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, believes that more must be done to deal with the CCP's aggressive behavior and to prevent the CCP from dominating neighboring countries and spreading its communist ambitions. On June 23rd, Haley indicated that if the United States does not fight the CCP on the Hong Kong issue, Taiwan will be next, and that the CCP's intention is to take down the island of freedom and democracy. Haley pointed out that Taiwan is one of our most valued and responsible partners in the Indo-Pacific. No one wants war, but the key to peace is strength. The CCP may threaten Taiwan to make the whole world more insecure and prone to conflict. Haley said that some U.S. officials and politicians, including herself, sent congratulatory messages to the newly elected president after the presidential election in Taiwan, but made Beijing angry. Anyone who supports Taiwan will be on the receiving end of Chinese criticism or threats. Haley emphasized Beijing's criticism as a badge of honor. It's a sure sign that you're doing something right. There are many factors that contributed to the present relations between the United States and China. These factors include the CCP's cover-up of the epidemic, hackers and spies, censorship in the U.S. media, the military expansionism in the South China Sea, the imposition of the national security law in Hong Kong, and many more. In a retaliation against the U.S., on July 24th, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs ordered the closure of the U.S. consulate in Chengdu, the capital of southwestern China's Sichuan province. The U.S. Consulate General in Chengdu opened in 1985 and currently has approximately 200 employees, with about 150 of them being Chinese employees hired locally. According to reports, the consulate covers southwest China, including Sichuan, Yunnan, Guizhou, Tibet, and Chongqing. It is of great strategic significance. The consulate was known to the outside world when Wang Lijuan, a former vice mayor and police chief of Chongqing, took harbor in the consulate on February 6, 2012. The retaliation of the closure of the U.S. Consulate General in Chengdu clearly shows that the Chinese Communist Party will continue fighting against the United States.